Hi everyone. In this video we'll talk about how to avoid getting stuck in therapy, or if you feel like you've been working with a clinician for a while and you're feeling like the progress has slowed down or you've stagnated in some way, what that might be about and how you can get unstuck. This video might also be framed as, how to ensure that you're getting the most out of therapy, or how to avoid getting stuck in therapy to ensure that things continue to progress and move. And this is based on, what I've learned in the 15 years or so that I've been doing this, and the three things that I tend to, always kind of do the little checklist, make sure that that it's firmly established or in place, or if I'm feeling like the sessions are floundering a little bit, I'll go back to this thing. So the three points of focus to avoid getting stuck, or to ensure that you're able to make the most out of the therapy sessions, involves the goals, the client goals, clarifying what they are, knowing what they are, keeping them in the foreground. Secondly, the motivation. Is the client feeling sufficiently motivated or energized to do some of the work, to make some of the necessary changes? And then lastly, the rapport. Does the client and therapist, do they have like a good connection, a good working rapport with one another? So those are the three things to focus on, I think. So we walk through each of those. So the goals. So I view therapy work as kind of like contract work. So I need to make sure that I understand what the job is. What do you want me to help you with? I don't have permission to jump in there and start asking, questions that might be uncomfortable, or rolling up my sleeves and, getting in there until I know what it is that you're wanting me to work on, to help you with. So in the first session, that's something that I'm paying very close attention to. I'm trying to get a good feel for what this client is wanting to do, how they're wanting to change. What is the internal problem that they're wanting to address? So we can't change the world out there. The world is going to do what it's going to do. But we can change, certain things within ourselves. How is this person wanting to feel? How are they not wanting to feel, perhaps? The client might say, I don't want to feel anxious anymore. I don't want to be afraid of social conversations. I want to feel happier. I want to feel energized. I want to feel more confident in situations that might involve disagreement or potential conflict. I want to be more assertive, whatever it is. I want to avoid these bad habits. I want to stop doing them. I want to engage in these other healthy activities, whatever it happens to be. So this is something that we try to clarify as much as possible in those beginning sessions. And it's something that we always come back to and keep that in the foreground, keep that in focus, to ensure that we're on target, that we're still on point. Now, a client doesn't have to know right away in the first appointment like what all that is. Sometimes it's vague, sometimes it's fuzzy, and part of my job might be ask at least enough questions that we can kind of clarify, what that is. It sounds like that this is something that you're uncomfortable with. It sounds like something that you prefer not to be in this state. Is that something that you want to change? Is that something that you want to work on? And usually, like in the sessions along the way, I'll try to avoid, losing sight of the goals and whatnot by restating them. I know that we're here to do the work on getting more comfortable opening up and being vulnerable with people. Is that something that we want to continue working on? Is that something that we want to focus on today? If not, where do we want to focus? Sometimes the goals change. But if you don't have those goals, the goals are like a destination point. This is where I want to go. This is what I'm aiming at. This is what I'm striving for. And we try to really tease that out by noting like the negative side of it. I don't want to feel all this stuff, or I don't want to engage in those kind of behaviors, these forms of thinking, but also in the positive sense. How do you want to think? How do you want to feel? How do you want to be? But if you don't have those goals established, or you talk about them only in the first appointment, you don't really come back to them, what can happen is that the sessions lose focus, they lose structure, and you can, without realizing it, fall into just conversations that, jump around from place to place, and they don't feel energized. It doesn't feel like there's any substantial kind of thing happening there, and it drifts, and a person or the therapy might kind of stagnate. It might stall out. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Keep those goals, know what they are first of all, and keep those goals in focus. Come back to them, revisit them. Make sure that they're still the goals that you're working toward. So that's one thing. Now the second thing is motivation. Is the client sufficiently motivated to do the work? Hopefully the clinician is motivated too. But is the client motivated? So part of what I will do is it's almost like a systems check in the beginning of therapy. Do we got our goals? Check. Is there motivation? Okay, let me see. So I might ask, sometimes it's obvious, right? If a person is just in tears, like just describing how awful, day-to-day life has been, and how terrible it is to feel depressed or anxious or, fearful of speaking their mind, whatever it happens to be. It sometimes very obvious. There's a distressing feeling, and you get a sense that they would do almost anything to get out of that, right? But sometimes it's not clear, sometimes it's something that you have to clarify, so I might ask people, well, how important are these goals? Like, what does it mean to be successful in our therapy work or not? If you could make those changes, if we could somehow make something happen here in these conversations where you are more confident, where you are able to assert yourself, where you're less depressed and anxious, whatever it is, what would that feel like? What would that be like? And, hopefully the person, you get a sense like, gosh, that would feel amazing. That would mean everything to me. Perhaps it would open up a whole new, world, or something like that would be good, or otherwise, sometimes people will say like, I've been to 5 or 6 other therapists, and I haven't found any help yet, and I've been dealing with this stuff for my whole life, and it's awful, and and I'll ask them, well, what happens if this is yet another failed attempt? What would that be like? If we're meeting here for like, 8, 9, 10 sessions and we're getting nowhere, how would that feel, do you think? And hopefully, the person would be, gosh, that would be horrible. That would be just, I'd be just gutted, that would be unacceptable. Like, I can't even fathom that. Yet again, it'd be disappointment beyond words. Like, that's part of the emotional energy that, the person is now connected to, the significance of it, the urgency of resolving these issues. And that's going to help them hold their feet to the fire in some sense. Doing this kind of work, sometimes it involves going down into deep, dark places, into the basement floors of your psyche, and challenging whatever minotaurs are down there, right? That can be really overwhelming, anxiety-inducing work. But if the person has the motivation, the energy, the fear of failure, not getting to that place that they've set out for themselves, like that has to be more terrifying, more of an awful, heartbreaking outcome than the discomfort in navigating whatever a person needs to navigate, right? So that's important. The motivation. So if you lack that motivation, if the motivation is lacking, what can happen is, the therapist sees that the client is in an awful place, and the therapist is wanting to be helpful, and the therapist can kind of fill that vacuum with their own energy and motivation and intensity to try to make something happen. But ultimately, that's not going to be helpful. It's not going to engage the client in an emotional way where they feel really connected to the work and the urgency around it and the significance of it. So that's going to be important. So with the motivation, I might ask clients from time to time, like, well, we seem to be stalling out here. We seem to be getting stuck here, or you seem kind of a little bit disengaged today. What's that about? Can we afford to just kind of coast through this session? Can you afford to wait? You've been waiting for years now to make some of these changes. Can you afford to wait another week, another month, another year? And those questions are intentionally trying to provoke that energy that wants to say, no, I can't wait, and invites them to engage in a deeper way. So we talked about goals as, where the destination, where you're going, where the client wants to be, where they want to end up. And then the motivation is like the gas in the tank, like the energy that's going to get you there. And, we might think of like the roadmaps. Well, who's got the roadmaps? Well, in many ways, the therapist has a number of roadmaps. They've worked with people who have been in similar places or have attempted to get to similar destinations. So they have, a number of different roadmaps. This roadmap might be handy, this one might be useful, this one, we might need. But the client determines where you're going, and the energy has to be within them to get them there. So that's important. So we talked about goals, motivation. And then the third place where people can get stuck, or the third thing that needs to be firmly established, is the rapport that you have with your clinician. Do you trust them? Do you feel like you can let your guard down? Can you be a bit vulnerable? Can you take risks with this person? Do you trust their judgment? And do you allow them? Do you give them permission to challenge you? Do you feel sufficiently challenged without being overwhelmed? That's the difference. So therapy should be hard work. It should be challenging. Like you gotta, go within yourself and in some uncomfortable places sometimes to make the requisite change. And that's going to be uncomfortable, but it should never be overwhelming. And a therapist needs to know the difference. And when I first started doing this work, I didn't know the difference. And I remember there was a time when I was really excited about these different therapy modalities, and they were really energizing, kind of emotion focused, very active forms of therapy. And I was really excited again to help people. But in that excitement, and I was clumsy at times. And I remember one client, we made some significant breakthrough into very relevant insights and feelings and all the rest, but it was too much, too soon, too quickly, and it was just overwhelming for the client. And they didn't book again. I suspect that's why they didn't book again. I felt really bad afterward. Even thinking about it now, I feel kind of bad about it. But I've learned that lesson, thankfully. And you got to trust that your client is not going to, or your clinician is not going to bring you any place where you can't handle it, And clients who are currently working with me, they know that I'm fond of boxing metaphors, something I've been doing in recent years. And it's like if you're going into a sparring session, like you trust your coach. You trust your coach is not going to throw you to the wolves. You trust your coach is not going to have you sparring with some guy who's going to take your head off, who's not going to, make things so difficult for you that you're going to just be overwhelmed and shut down. And therapy is kind of like that. I think I've used this metaphor as well, that therapy is kind of like, good physiotherapy or massage therapy. Sometimes, if you want to get that mobility, that range of motion back, to connect with dormant parts of yourself, you need someone to get in there and use the elbows, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but you trust them. You trust what they're doing. You trust their intentions, and you trust that they have the skill and the knowledge to know what is, what you can tolerate, what you can deal with, and what is ultimately going to be beneficial there. Now, if that's kind of touch and go, or you're not sure if that's firmly established, then that's something you want to check out with your therapist. If I had a client who said to me, Brad, I'm not sure, how well we're relating here. I don't know if I feel comfortable with you, or there's something that just feels a little bit off. I can't put my finger on it. I would take that as as a good thing. Okay, well, let's talk about that. I'm glad you feel comfortable enough telling me that. Let's check that out. Sometimes it can be, you know, maybe a client not knowing, like, well, why are you asking these kinds of questions, or what is this about? Like, there's not maybe the goals, you're not unified with what the goals are, or maybe how to get there, what that might look like. Maybe a clinician reminds a client of some person in the past and they don't even realize it, and that's maybe a point of discomfort. But on my side of things, that's something I'm often kind of checking out. Usually I'll make notes in my process notes after the fact. We seem to have good rapport, or rapport seems a little tenuous. I need to take my time, need to pace myself. I need to check in with this person frequently and kind of see how we're doing, their comfort level, and so on. So that's something to be mindful of. And so if you have those three things, you have the goals firmly established, you have the motivation, the energy to do the work, to get into the trenches and endure some of that discomfort, and you have a clinician who you have a good rapport with, someone that you trust, someone who is going to challenge you without overwhelming you, that all is going to bode really well. And usually, at least from my experience, when therapy kind of stagnates or it gets a little bit stuck or stalled out, usually there will be a problem in one of those three places. So hopefully that can help you gain some insight into what might be going on in your own therapy, or if you haven't done therapy and you're thinking about doing it, those are some things that you want to keep in mind. Okay, so that's it for today. If you have any insights on your own experiences in therapy, and what has been helpful or unhelpful, or things that you think are important that maybe that I haven't touched on, feel free to offer those comments there below the video. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate that, and we'll catch you there in the next one. Thanks.